The Journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today. Well, welcome to the Journey, Jeri Gilmore, and I know we have known each other through church and primarily church, and I know you've been to a couple different SOS events and a couple of things that that I've been involved with. But so, Jeri, if you could maybe before we get into your story, and you've had a pretty fascinating story, if you could maybe just share a little bit about who you are and your background, but also maybe before we get into all that, just what do you do for fun? If you have an opportunity to have fun, what do you do? Because I know there's some changes that just recently happened, so that changes things. Well,
yes, I am retired. So I had a gun shop, and I sold that. I sold the inventory, sold the building, retired from that. I like reading books. I like listening to music. I like hiking.
Okay.
I'm not a big sports fan. I used to shoot trap, skate. Kind of got away from that. My eyes are not as good as they used to be, so I don't do it well.
Sure.
So it's not fun. But I do those kind of things. I used to bicycle. I've had heart issues, so I don't do that as much as I should now.
Okay.
But yes, as I've gotten older, I now have other things that are failing. But I do enjoy more sedate things, you know, and being with friends, going out to dinner or whatever, lunch kind of things, volunteering for stuff at church.
Okay. And so if we looked at your bookshelf or looked at your books, what types of, is there a certain genre book that you are most likely to read, or what would you find? What would we find?
I like murder mysteries.
Murder mysteries, okay.
I like murder mysteries. I like the old Agatha Christie's are great. I have read a lot of Jane Austen and other stuff. I read some other fiction.
Okay.
I do read some religious fiction because I do have a heart that goes to faith.
Okay.
I read my Bible, and I read other things that pertain to that too for daily devotionals, but I read a lot of murder mysteries and fiction on some unusual authors I guess I've come across.
Sure.
Not a big Stephen King fan, but I have some similar.
Okay, some similar authors to Stephen King. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, are you from the Rockford area? Or?
No, I grew up downstate Illinois. Paxton, Illinois is where I went to school, small farming community.
Okay.
Worked and lived for a while in Champaign-Urbana.
Okay.
Moved further south to Mattoon area where I went to school for automotive profession. And I lived and worked in Mattoon and in the Charleston area.
Okay.
My daughter lives just east of Charleston, Illinois, in Ashmore, a little bitty town of, a couple hundred people.
Okay.
She works for the Charleston School District now. She's 36.
She's a school teacher?
No, she's the office manager or whatever for the school district in a middle school there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. But that's, I met my partner over 30 years ago, or about 30 years ago now, at a thing in Detroit, Michigan, and she was a county officer in Winnebago County. I could leave my job and change jobs. It was harder for her. She's closer to retirement.
Sure, okay.
And so I moved here.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. So from downstate. So how was Jeri in high school and in middle school, high school, growing up? Well, let me first ask, mom, dad, any siblings?
I have a brother who is in Jacksonville, Florida. He moved there over 30 years ago.
Older, younger?
Younger. He's 5 years younger than I am.
Okay.
My father lives in Jacksonville area now. He moved down there with my mother when she came down with dementia. He moved there so he could be closer to one of us. He debated between Rockford or Jacksonville. Okay. A little more infrastructure with my brother since his kids were both there and his wife was there to help take care of my mother. Okay. My partner had passed away, so I was here by myself, and it was warmer down there.
Sure.
So he chose to move to Jacksonville. So Dad is 91, still in the Jackson, that area. He's like a few blocks away from my brother.
Okay.
So it's easy for Dave to keep an eye on him.
Sure.
But yes, yeah. So that's family, and my daughter is in, like I say, downstate. What was I in high school? Squirrely kid. I mean, I was a geeky little squirrel. Good at mechanical stuff, that kind of thing. Lousy at sports. Played in band. Not well, but I played.
Okay. And you said Paxton was the town, or was that the high school, or was it both?
It was both.
It was both. Okay.
Yeah.
And how big is Paxton? How big is
5,000 people.
Okay, so the school is small.
School was pretty small then. We had 105 people in my graduating class.
Okay.
A total of about 500 in the whole school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not real big.
Yeah, not real big, but for some schools, around here,
Yes.
it would be like in the outlying areas of the Rockford area. More rural areas around here have a smaller schools. And so, was there a big? You said that you didn't play sports, so was there an emphasis on sports in that particular school, or was it because some schools, if they have a tradition of winning at smaller schools, then that becomes everything, and or was it just that?
I don't think they had a tradition of winning, but they did have a big impetus in playing football, basketball. Not much other than that. They didn't have a lot of funding and participation for it.
In the minors,
Okay. Yes.
So then, graduate from high school. What year did you graduate from high school?
71.
71. And then, upon graduating from high school, what did life have? What did you do in life then?
Well, somebody thought I should go to college, so I proceeded to go to college for a semester and drop out of that one, go to another one for a semester, drop out of that one, because I didn't want to be in any of those.
Okay. And so I'm assuming parents wanted you to be
Yes.
wanted you to do the college thing?
My father knew that I should be going to college.
Okay.
And I'm like, no, I don't need to be going to college.
Yeah.
A lot of underlying issues that were an influence in my life.
Yeah. And it's interesting about that is, this idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday we were listening to a sermon, and it talked about Zechariah, that he spoke into. Am I getting the name right? Yeah, Zechariah spoke into his son, John the Baptist, that he was going to be a great prophet.
Yes.
And in this idea of having a calling and having a purpose that had been bestowed through his father to him.
Yes.
And it was illustrated in Luke how powerful that can be, right?
Yes.
And then sometimes we have parents who may speak with a level of authority about doing something, but maybe not out of the same God space when that happens, but maybe out of some other place.
Well, I think my father had a desire that I do better than he did. Like most parents, they all want their children to be better,
Sure.
to do more with themselves, accomplish more. I was dealing with gender dysphoria, and nobody knew it. We didn't talk about it in the 60s and 70s. That wasn't something you talked about. I learned early on that people laughed at someone that had gender issues. During a family thing, laughing about Christine Jorgensen, I think, back in the mid-'60s and early '60s, and it was like, so we don't tell people. So I tucked that away. And didn't really know how to deal with it. I didn't know what I wanted to do to be when I grew up. I'm still not sure. But I was good at fixing cars. So it was finally after dropping out of this school, failing at that school, failing at another school, I got a job in a factory for a while. I got a job servicing new cars at a dealership for a while. I went to another factory assembling machines for a while. The drugs at that point in time, I wanted to do those more than work. So I was lead assembly mechanic at Baltimore Air Coil in Paxton, Illinois, and I walked out the door. I'm like, nah, I'm not doing this.
Okay.
And I had fun doing drugs, selling drugs. I had fun. Then I decided, okay, you should probably be a little more responsible than this. Went to Lakeland Community College in Mattoon and expanded my skills as an automotive technician and moved into that field and just did it. And it was an existence.
Sure.
It was something to do.
And made some money. Now, did you
Made money.
Did you live independently at that time?
Off and on, yes. I mean, my dad had a place in Mattoon that he had a little Christmas tree farm was the plan for the retirement, for his retirement. So my brother and I both lived at the little farmhouse. At the time, they had a little bitty farmhouse there. They took it, sold, and moved that house and built a new one. But we lived there for a while off and on, and then I got a farmhouse of my own I rented. I had a couple of different places that I rented before I ultimately got married the first time. But yes, and I mean, I went through Lakeland. I worked at a shop in Charleston, all the time keeping myself numb with drugs.
When did drugs come into it, and how old were you? At what time period was that? And
19 years old.
Okay.
I found marijuana. It found me.
Okay.
And that kept me numb.
Okay.
It numbed the pain of the gender dysphoria issue. It just numbed the pain of life, and so I did a lot of I mean, we were smoking reefer all the time. Yes, amphetamines every now and then, downers sometimes. Never was really good at downers. I'd sleep a lot.
Sure.
They knocked me right out.
Yeah.
Hallucinogens, other things. Whatever was out there, we were having fun.
Sure.
And it just kind of let me get through life, and I kept myself numb for about 13 years of life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going back, when 19 is when, at 19, obviously you're out of high school now.
Yes.
And you're, some pressure from your parents, specifically your dad, that this is what I think you should do. This is
Yes.
what, and I get it, and I get it as a father of two. I get that we want, we want our kids to be as prepared as they can be. And sometimes I think there is this idea that we may see doubt in our kids, and so we speak into it so that maybe they can believe in something more than what they see.
Okay. My father wasn't good at that, and my mother would never say anything.
Okay.
My mom was quiet.
Okay.
She never, one way or another, said much of anything,
Okay.
good or bad. I mean, it was just like she was quiet, and Dad's the boss.
Yeah.
But my father was not good at raising children.
Okay.
His attitude was, to yell. Not that he didn't love us, because he'll do anything in the world. Has for the last many, many years. Even when I came out with the whole gender issue, Daddy was like, well, you're family, period, and did things to help me.
Sure.
He didn't understand it, but he did things to help us. But as far as a parent and leading you into education, career, what do you want to do? You got to make up your mind. And it was, it was a lot of, God damn it, dumbass, what are you going to do with yourself?
Sure.
Basically, I mean, that was like the over and over mantra that my father would have.
Which in itself doesn't seem super motivating.
No, it wasn't.
Sure.
I kind of came out of childhood growing up with, a lack of self-confidence.
Sure.
Some would call it PTSD or whatever they want to give it a name. It's just a case of that's what he tried to do. It didn't work.
Yeah.
I survived it.
Sure. So how, roughly, if you can remember, what age were you coming into this understanding that the gender you were given at birth was not what you were feeling? Something else was going on here. When did that begin?
About 8 years old.
About 8 years old.
Yeah.
That's awful young to be, awful young from a standpoint of beginning to keep a secret.
And it's hard to say that this was my great solution. This was an epiphany or whatever. It was like an awareness of I'm different. Mm-hmm. There's something different about me. There's something I don't see in other people, and I wasn't aware enough of everything to go with a good conscious decision. But at that point in time, like I say, my family was together after the holidays. We'd been in Japan. My father was in the Air Force, and we came back from Japan, a family get together, and they were talking about this person, Christine Jorgensen, who had a gender reassignment, a sex change surgery, and blah, blah. And to me, it was like, maybe that's what's wrong, and there's an answer. Mm-hmm. Of course, when my favorite aunt made a comment about a little nip and tuck, he's a she, and everybody laughed, that was the big lesson. That said, don't tell anyone. Mm-hmm. It's wrong. They think you're weird. They'll laugh at you. They'll laugh at you. Mm-hmm. Don't tell anyone ever. Mm-hmm. So you tuck it away and you think, well, I'll get over this. Well, you don't. Mm-hmm. Through school, you try to be normal. Mm-hmm. Drugs numbed the pain when I could finally go out and do something on my own and find those. But it didn't get rid of the problem. The problem only got more and more and more. I thought I'll try and be normal. I got married. We had a child. I'm working. I'm normal. Until I'm almost killing myself. I mean, I'm on motorcycle thinking about the oncoming trucks, and this is a good solution because there's no way out, and nobody will find enough pieces, and this will end it. And I'm over 100 mile an hour looking at oncoming trucks.
So it goes from a hopelessness to a death ideation. Maybe I'm better off not being here.
Yes.
And now we're looking at a plan of how it can happen. So now it's suicidal ideation.
Yes.
Even if you are making it look like an accident.
Yes.
Okay.
I have like this, I don't know, I think I have this internal core of self-preservation.
Okay.
Throughout life, I guess, as I look back now being a saved Christian, I look back and it's like the Holy Spirit was working. Because there are things that I would do that were like, okay, I want to kill myself. I want to stop this life. But there are other things I would do to stop and not do that and prevent, that. I never owned any guns. I tried more drugs than I should have. That didn't work. I'd survive all those one way or another. I mean, I'd wake up places I didn't know where I was from drugs. And that didn't kill me accidentally. At one point, I was sure I'd never see 30 years old. Sure.
Just because of the recklessness of...
it's like this, yes, I don't care. I'm doing drugs and we're having whatever. And whatever happens, happens. Mm-hmm. If I die, cool. I won't have any more pain.
Mm-hmm. You've referred to... If there... Have you been able to name, looking back on it now, have you been able to name the pain? What was the pain?
Wow. An emotional, physical combination. Okay. I mean, I'm stuck in a guy's body. Mm-hmm. This is wrong.
Okay.
I mean, it works and I did all that. I mean, obviously I fathered a child. But it was just wrong. It was that pain of not being what I thought I should be. Okay. Yes. Okay. Wrong parts.
Yeah.
How do I change them?
But also, you talked about not only a societal norm that was closed, right? About it, a perspective, overhearing one conversation that your family has about someone that they didn't know and you didn't know, right? Locked in your psyche of what was not going to be okay,
Correct.
Right. So is that's all contributing factors to this pain?
That is, and of course, everyone you know, I mean, work in the automotive industry, those are a bunch of macho guys.
Sure.
I mean, they've got every bad name in the book for men that are gay. Jokes about lesbians. Anything else that falls in there is just absolutely queer, sick. I mean, the names are horrible, and they go on. And you're part of that community. So your conversations, in order to fit into the community, you're one of them. And for a long time, I was one of them. Now I'm not. Now I'm one of those. One of the bad people that they talk about. Society is gradually changing their viewpoint. It's more accepted to be different. Even in religion, it's hard. Organized religion these days, they're having arguments between the Methodist Church is split. Our evangelical covenant has had issues. But it's like everything in life tells you you're wrong, you don't fit in. You're the square peg trying to be stuck in a round hole. It doesn't work.
Well, and maybe you can speak a little bit about that, because there's there's going to be people who listen to this who aren't going to understand, right? And because a lot of times we can understand something based upon our own experience, right? But then there's certain things that if we don't have our own experience with, either through knowing someone or whatever, then because we have a tendency as humans, we have a tendency to be egocentric. I think the world is as I look at the world, because I see the world a certain way, then that must be how the world is. And then we may not understand something. So you had talked about at a young age knowing that something wasn't right, not knowing for sure what that was, getting a clear message that I'm not supposed to talk about this, or I can't talk about this.
Okay.
And then tried, as you said, either in school, in a profession, even getting married, having a child, that you're trying to be, as you keep saying, normal.
Yes. That's what people call it, being normal.
Yeah.
That's our stereotype, the society's definition of normal, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell someone else that has no concept of, how do you tell a white person what it's like to be black? In the gender issue, I've even had people go, well, you can't compare yourself to black people. True, you can't. Because you walk in the grocery store, I know you're black.
Yeah.
I walk in the grocery store, they don't know there's anything different about me until maybe I speak to them and my voice is a little deeper and they look a little closer and they're like, oh, there's something different about you. But I've already got inside, there wasn't a sign where your color will give you away.
Sure.
I've read some things written by some black authors about that, and the darker you are, they even have their own prejudices. How do you describe something that you're experiencing unless somebody has it happen? I've seen things on television. I've read things about, someone finds out their child thinks they're the wrong gender, and this child is 8-10 years old. They don't understand it. It's a hard thing. It really does. I spent a lot of time, I used to watch late night television, and Tom Snyder had a couple of people on who were transgender at the time, going through things. So I learned some more about that. I did some research through Johns Hopkins. I got their medical journal and went through that on what they do for reassignment, what they did back then, which was pretty crude. Fortunately, I found a lot better surgeon. But it's something, but it's not something that people go looking at to learn about.
Yeah.
We don't teach it.
Yeah.
If you encounter someone, okay. If you see someone who's extreme on television or whatever, well, okay, that might not be the best example.
Sure.
So it's hard to explain to someone that's going to watch this and go, "What in the heck is this?"
Right.
You just, I don't know. It's hard to explain to someone unless you've been somewhere you didn't fit.
Well, and in this particular case, which is, you didn't say this, but part of that pain was being somewhere where you don't fit, and it happens to be your body. That's
every day you walk out the door, I'm a liar.
Yeah. And at that time, especially when you were a young adult and you first were married,
yes.
you were living it
yes.
on multiple levels of trying to be normal, as you said.
Trying to fit. Prior to being married, I had a little freedom. I had a little choice. Once I got married, it was like somebody locked jail doors. Unless you've been in jail, you don't know what that experience is like. I was there once, too. It's a permanent thing. It's like, oh, man, I'm not going to get out of here. When I got married, it was like, oh, probably not a good decision. But because I was raised by a hard head and I can be hard-headed, I'm going to try and make it work. So I tried to make it work. Stay stoned morning, noon, and night. 24, whatever. When I'm awake, I'm high, whatever else I can find to keep me numb. But I'm going to try and make it work and be normal, fit in, and move through life. But yes, you're lying. You can't. You can only numb so much of that pain.
Yeah. And
pretty soon it's like, okay, the drugs aren't working.
Yeah.
And yes.
I know earlier you were telling me about that day. Your daughter was about a year old, and the pain of this lie, the pain of this life, right? And it wasn't even a double life. This life of a secret,
yes,
right? And it isn't going away, right? You're not. You can't smoke it away. You can't. You can't ride your motorcycle fast enough to make it go away. You can't fake it away.
No,
right? And you were talking about this time when you were on the road going at a pretty high speed.
Yes.
And you picked the vehicle, the semi. I think you said semi.
Big trucks, semis coming down the highway at me. I had a path I would take out of Charleston and go east on Route 16. And my motorcycle, I'm well over 100 mile an hour. And I had done it. I had thought about this enough. One time I did change lanes, and you know what? At that speed, you're so fast that truck is past you, and you missed it. Thank God I didn't hit the back end of it. And it was like, boy, you got to plan better. And I started, mathematically kind of counting seconds or whatever and going, okay, you can get here. You could do this. And of course you go fast and you think about this. I got a night and it's like, enough. I can't do this anymore. And I'm going as fast as that thing will go. I'm well over 100 mile an hour. I got a huge Peterbilt dump truck coming. And I'm like, he's big enough. This will work just great. And I kid you not, Kevin, I'm like almost there. And okay, I call this the Holy Spirit thing, a God moment. There's a picture of my daughter, this little 18-month-old, sitting in the backyard in the sun on a blanket with a little yellow bonnet and a little white blouse with a lace yellow collar and her little Oshkosh bib overalls and her little sandals with a smile on her face. That picture flashed in my head. And I'm like, I cannot leave this child with that legacy. And so I did not. And I would drive east and turn around in another little small town and come back home, where I would park the motorcycle in the garage and go down in the basement and do a couple of bong hits, roll a doobie, and get stoned. Well, this evening on the way home, I come up over a little rise and my motorcycle, a high-speed shimmy, it started to shimmy. And I'm like, oh, man. Well, I know enough riding bikes how to ride through it, not hit the brakes and do something silly. Slowed down and stable. But at that point I realized I don't want to die. So I call it my scared straight.
Sure.
And at that time, it was like, okay, it took me a couple of days to sit down with my wife and go, I'm sorry, but I cannot continue to do this. I have to do something or I'm going to kill myself. The drugs aren't fixing it. And so it was like, well, then I was informed, then we're getting a divorce. I don't want to be a lesbian. And we needed an abortion because we're pregnant again. And of course, at that point, life crashed. I mean, everything that you had that was a stable thing, I told my employer. Well, I was invited to leave so I wouldn't ruin his business. So I'm changing jobs, we're selling a house, we're getting a divorce, we're going through an abortion, and I'm quitting drugs. I had a friend who was a unemployed pastor that was a mechanic at the shop where I worked, and he was a friend. My personal counselor, I guess, for parts of it, who said, the 3 hardest things somebody can do, and you're doing all 3 of them at the same time. What's wrong? How can you do it? How are you that tough? And I said, John, I'm quitting drugs also. And he was flabbergasted. I didn't tell him that we're also getting an abortion. He was just like blown over by all of it. And it was very hard. I started seeing a psychologist to help me move forward with the gender issues. And she was the one who said, you can't make decisions like this when you're on drugs. So I started working towards quitting drugs. I could lie to her when she'd ask me how I was doing. I'm doing great. Haven't had any in 5 days, Well, okay, I did a couple of days ago. I'd steal a couple of hits out of my stash because you keep stuff hidden away. You're a good liar at this point.
Yeah.
You've done it a long time. But I did. It was 2 days, 5 days, 2 weeks. Pretty soon it was like, okay, I'm clean. And I started moving forward, making those changes. I got a different job. We sold the house. We went our separate ways. I would have visitation with my daughter. And I was moving forward.
And how old were you about this time?
30.
Okay.
30. And I started at it when I was 30 on my trip, probably about 30, 32.
Okay.
32, because Kara was about 2. So I'd be 32 at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so I was settling into a job, working at a different place. I was actually service managing an auto repair facility for a couple of brothers that I knew. They owned a car truck shop, and I was service managing that. And I was in a house that my father bought that rented to me for nothing. Daddy was still taking care of me. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, we'll settle into this and see if we can't, work towards the ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. And I probably would have been back to drugs if I hadn't achieved that goal, but I went to a convention for, we call them LBGT now or whatever. We didn't back then. But I went to a convention in Detroit, Michigan, where I met my partner, who was a county officer in Winnebago County, Paula DePau, who was also transgender. She passed, it's almost 11 years now, from cancer, lung cancer. But I met her there. We fell in love, and at that time, it took about a year of less than a year of us seeing each other. I would drive up here, she would drive down to Mattoon, and I moved here. She was probably that stable force that kept me from going back to drugs. Or I would probably have been back there and done something stupid if I hadn't achieved my goal. She was a person who, if there's a goal, has a driving force that you cannot stop. Mm. I mean, it's like, this person is made out of granite. We're going this way, and this is it. And she did. I mean, she was like, okay, you want to do this? We'll do this. And this is where we're heading, and we did.
So in some ways, there's a similarity. You described it differently with your father.
Yes.
But Dad was pretty determined. I think you called him stubborn and bullheaded. But but there was an element that Paula was similar.
We marry our fathers. Or guys marry their moms.
Yes, exactly. So yes, some psychobabblers probably came up with that. Yes, but there was something different about Paula than from your father.
Yes.
And what part was different? Even though the determination was there and the discipline and being, there was something also though different, because sometimes we do marry a mirror image of our parent, and then it ends up being just as dysfunctional as it was when we were growing up. But so there must have been something that was different with Paula, besides that she was very driven.
I'm not sure what it would be exactly.
Okay.
I mean, we loved each other. We had that relationship. It just was, and I'm not sure exactly. I think that if my dad understood and knew what it was, he'd have probably helped me do that too. But she didn't have a preconceived, I guess her preconceived notion of what I wanted to be was what I wanted to be. Whereas my father wanted me to be what every daddy wants his oldest son to be. So whereas, so probably a similar determination.
Okay.
A similar focus.
But that piece is huge. What you just said, it was a subtle difference, but it's a huge difference.
Yes.
And I think for all the parents out there, this is an important difference.
Okay. Yes, I get. Yes. Don't put your child in a box that you think is the box,
right? That you created.
That you create.
Yeah.
Yes, they have to find their own direction.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say support that. I have tried to be supportive of my daughter, whatever she tries to do. She didn't do well in school. I didn't either. I'm like, sweetie, I get that. Just find a job, something that you can see what you like, and take some time and find what you think you want to do.
Be curious.
She has.
Yeah, it's important to I think there's an element of importance of curiosity and to explore, and some people know,
yes,
and others don't,
no,
and that's okay, and be able to explore. I mean, like for you knew that there was a mechanical aspect that you were drawn to.
I had a talent,
and it came, and just like anything that we may have a gift or a talent at, the more that we do it, the better we become, the easier it is to do it. Now that in itself may not be fulfillment, and we may not become passionate about it.
No, I burnt out with that trade, and at one point it was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to fix cars anymore. I don't like this. It's frustrating. I'm beat. The computers didn't help me. I'm not good with them. And so my partner, being a cop and into guns, it was like, well, let's start a gun shop. So we started a gun shop, and I had that. And of course, we were 2 years into the gun shop when she was diagnosed with cancer and passed away rather quickly. But I kept the gun shop going for another 10 years. It was 13 years, whatever, in the gun shop business. I could retire from that. It's provided me enough to retire. I think that a lot of the joy there was I'm not into what a lot of people perceive to be firearms these days. I like the beautiful Browning wood and metal trap guns, skeet guns, sport things like that. There's some gorgeous handguns out there in older stuff, whatever, that's beautiful. Yeah, there's the black Glocks, the semi-automatics, those that everybody buys because they like. I have guys that were really good target shooters that had fun with it. My gun shop turned into its own little ministry, I guess. I mean, guys would come in there to buy a gun, but they'd stand and tell you all their troubles.
Sure.
So it was a different change, and it was something other than working on cars. So that was a change in growth also.
Sure. Yeah.
When my partner passed away, I had other people that distracted me from that.
Sure.
So yeah.
So I kind of fast forward. I have unfortunately recently I've had family members, friends of our family who have had cancer, been diagnosed with cancer, going through the cancer, and so you and Paula had been together how long when she was diagnosed with lung cancer?
22 years.
Oh, you'd been together 22 years when she was
almost. Well, we've been together 21 years.
21 years at the point.
We made almost 22.
Okay. So she was diagnosed, and then,
yes.
And it sounds like a very short time period
yes.
was the of having, not only from the diagnosis, but to her passing.
Yes.
If there's anything, when you think back about that time period, if there was anything to kind of describe that, what was that? I mean, you guys have been together. This was the one. This was your one.
Yes.
And so, tell us a little bit about.
Oh my gosh. She'd chain smoke when you were traveling. We go to my folks at Christmas time or right after Christmas for whatever, be with my folks. And I noticed that she wasn't smoking as much. Her appetite was down. When we got home, I fixed a dinner, and she just couldn't eat it. And it's like, I don't know, it all just tastes weird. I'm like, okay, I didn't understand that. But then she's not eating, period. And so I'm like, you need to go to the doctor. I know. So she went to one, didn't do what they wanted, whatever. She didn't like it. So she came home. I'm like, what did they tell you? Well, they don't know yet. So, we're not telling you. Well, finally she got to the point where she was bad enough, malnourished, dehydrated, that Valentine's Day I drove her to the emergency room. Valentine's Day we were diagnosed with lung cancer. The doctor and a nurse came back in the room, and she said, I'm afraid that I have to tell you, you have a cancer. We don't know the extent of it. We need to admit you, do the tests, find out what's going on. Well, she was diagnosed with small cell lung cancer. It was in her lungs, and there were spots on her liver and a few other places. So they prescribed the chemotherapy, the oncologist chemotherapy. They couldn't do surgery. It was too far spread. They were pretty aggressive with the chemo, and she wasn't keeping up with staying hydrated because foods didn't taste good. Sure. So they told her that probably 12 months. Well, she didn't make 12 months. She made 3. And on May 21st, she passed that year. So she made about 3 months, but she was back in the hospital at that point in time because dehydrated, a blood clot. Blood clots occurred, and then an infection, probably a staph infection also, was more than her body could handle at that point in time. And It was like, this is... she was ready to go at that time, and let her be. It was hard. I'm not sure how I kept going forward. I just did. I mean, okay, yes, I had my year of depression. I'd go to work, do my job, saw to it that I'm making money and paying the bills, go home, make a frozen pizza, and drink beer in front of the TV. Go to bed. That's it. That was my existence for a while. Dave Linforce was in the gun shop as a gun customer, but he also visited Paula as a friend. We neither one of us went to church at the time, but Pastor Dave, he'd stop as a friend and visit her. He'd come in and see how I was doing. I'd always see him every couple of weeks, even still, or even until I closed the gun shop. He'd come in and see how you're doing. But he came in and he would visit her, and then when she passed, he'd come in and check on me, and I'd lie, I'm doing great.
Sure.
But so it was hard, losing someone. I mean, it was an intense 3 months of trying to provide care for someone dealing with cancer, because, I mean, there are times she couldn't get out of the bathtub, couldn't get out of the shower. I'd help her do that, get dressed, try and make sure she'd try to eat something, please eat something, and then and I would get up early, so I'd get my own breakfast. I'd stay up late taking care of things at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But it was a hard journey.
Sure.
But most of my life was where I wanted it to be for me at that point in time. So it wasn't like I'm dealing with other issues.
Yeah.
This is my only thing.
Yeah. So the old dragons have been put to rest.
Yeah. Yes.
But now Paul passes now, and you're in the initial stages of grief and in this afterwards, and the world becomes big again. Meaning, not necessarily in a good way. You know that, okay, and so I know that with Pastor Davis, checking in with you, and first as a customer, and then just as it became friends, there was a level of you started coming to church.
I had a big change in my another big change in my life. I had an issue about a year or two after Paula passed away. I'd had detached retina. I had surgery for that. I had tears in another one. I had stuff for that. About a year later, I had a lung collapse. I was still smoking. Some, not as much as I had been, but I was still smoking, and I had a spontaneous pneumothorax. Middle of the night, it collapsed. Okay. I mean, I'd had some pain that probably was a preemptive warning, which you ignore. Don't tell doctors. Don't go see them. And it was like, I'm in bed, and it's like, man, this really hurts up here, and I got pain over here, and I can't breathe. And I'm like, this must be a heart attack, self-diagnosis. So I'll go take a couple of aspirin. So I crawl my way downstairs to the kitchen, get a couple of aspirin. I do those. I'm sitting on the edge of my bed, and I'm having trouble breathing. And out loud, said, God, I need your help. I will tell you there are miracles. I swear, he sat down on the bed, put an arm around my shoulders, and said, it's okay, I've got you. Did he cure me? No. He said, dial 911, stupid. But it was like I had a calm come over me at that point that I cannot describe. I called 911. I got downstairs so I could unlock the door so that they could get in. I called a friend to come close my home for me. I knew he would be up at 1 a.m. playing video games or online doing something, and he came, like one of my adopted kids, and he came over and took care of it, closed my place, saw to that. He was a trained first responder, so he got there right behind the city cop that showed up, and he checked my pulses, and he goes, you're not having a heart attack. He says, what they're going to do when they get here, and he said, this is going to happen, that's going to, I'm like, Mike, I'm okay. I'm good. Whatever happens, happens. Like, okay. So, and I was calm as could be. In the hospital, emergency room, everything. When it came to surgery, I'm like, you do what you need to do. Whatever happens is okay. I'm good with it. I wasn't telling people at that time, God's got me, but he did. And so that was my salvation moment, my religious awakening. Okay. Dave would come in the shop, and he invited me to church one time. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I remember organized religion. I walked out of a church at 19 because they're being dumb. And I'm like, okay. So second time he invited me, I'm like, I guess I'll go listen to this. And it was like, okay, this is the spot that I need to be. Kudos to Bethesda Covenant and that congregation. They were very loving, welcoming, kind of felt like family. And I have a lot of friends there now. That is my new family. But it was like, yes, and so my life changed that way, and even with the advent of a new pacemaker a couple of years ago, I'm okay. Whatever's happening is happening. The Lord's taking care of me, whatever direction, and I'm looking for that next step in this season of my life.
Sure.
So it's good. I'm very at peace with myself. Does suicide go away completely? Don't be fooled. I had a situation during the holidays, and I still don't like holidays, that it was like someone did something, I upset someone, they made a comment about something, I upset my father. And he sent me a little letter, little thing, whatever. And I'm like, well, I could just lay that on the coffee table and put a bullet through my head and that'll show you. And I'm like, devil, you're sneaking in through a crack, aren't you? Get out of my house. Get behind me, Satan, kind of thing. So it's there. And it happens. I have coping mechanisms. I remember one of your SOS things about coping mechanisms, and people who go through a lot of trouble, they have coping mechanisms. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so, all right, I understand this. Get out of here. Leave me alone. I'm not going to do this. Life is good. What happens will happen. It's in God's hands, and it'll be okay. I have had no desire to go back to drugs. Yes, I like my glass of wine. Occasionally, but no, it's a good balance now. Yeah.
I appreciate when you were saying that. There's certain things that are just not okay.
Yes.
Regardless if it's legal now in Illinois or not, it's not okay because it's similar because it's a different. It could be misused as a different type of escape because that was the mechanism of escape in the past.
Yes.
And so it could fill into and then slowly sneak in there. And similar, and I appreciate you saying that, is that even though after that first, maybe not the first experience, but the experience you told us about when you were riding your motorcycle and you had that vision of your daughter and you didn't want to die.
Correct.
And maybe for the first time in a long time, you knew that things had to change, but death was not the way it was going to change.
No, death is, I've heard more than one person refer to this as the temporary or the permanent solution to a temporary problem. Yeah, I was in the midst of a temporary problem. Yeah. There's other solutions. Right. Suicide is permanent. Yeah. You cannot fix this broken problem by doing that.
Yeah. And that what was revealed to you was the legacy that would leave for everyone left behind. That ripple effect that's left behind, and as you've been to different SOS events, you see the pain that choice has left on other people. And then those things, in a lot of ways, there was some liberation, some freedom as you went through the process of the surgeries and reassignment and all those aspects. But then once again, it was like we joked earlier. It's kind of like just because you moved to San Diego and you always wanted to move to San Diego doesn't mean that you didn't happen to show up in San Diego. There's still, there's still going to be an aspect. There's going to be still some dragons and some demons that you have to face.
Oh yes.
And with your relationship with Paula and all the things that you discovered about yourself in that relationship, that maybe because of how she is, that there was no hiding.
No.
And then having again that, I think you said it, that awakening on the side of the bed.
Yes.
That it didn't have to do with anybody else or anything else except you and God.
That's right. Yes.
That's different.
That was it.
That's something different, right?
Very, very different.
Because now we can't rationalize away that it's some psychological trick or some other thing.
No.
This was, and again, similar to something you said earlier, is that it's real hard to explain that experience.
Oh, it's so hard.
and because someone who's had the experience, like myself, I know exactly what that was.
Yes.
But I don't have any more words for it than you do.
I know. It's indescribable. It is very hard to describe. You just cannot. I was talking to someone. Well, we had the Heart Prince meeting Saturday, and I was, sharing some things. I said, it's bigger than falling in love the first time. It really is. I mean, it's like the first time when I really, really fell in love, it was like, this is total glorious bliss, It was better than that. Bigger than that. Yeah. Deeper than that. It just, oh golly.
Yeah. Well, to feel that love at a deeper level and then peace come at the same time.
Yes.
And in the midst of everything else, so to speak, burning down around you. But it's going to be okay.
I'm dying, but that's all right.
Yeah. And that wasn't being suicidal.
No.
That wasn't death ideation. That wasn't any of that.
All out of my control.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that element of peace, and similar to when you described to me yesterday when I asked you about, retiring and closing the shop and closing that chapter of your life, that it's okay. I'm just open to the next chapter.
Yes. Yeah.
So Jeri, I so appreciate you coming in and not only being vulnerable and sharing your story, but sharing your journey of those different time periods of pain and naming that pain, but then also your experience of peace, your experience with God, who you came to understand versus what was originally put on you.
Yes. Yeah, that original. Yeah, this is this. Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah. It's very good.
So for anybody listening, what would you want to leave them with as we're wrapping up today?
Oh, my goodness. Stay open-minded. Whatever you think is happening to you, stay open-minded. If your loved one's close to you don't share that and can't understand it, try and find someone who will. Most pastors will listen to you. If they don't, they know someone who will.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Jeri, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin,
for being here, and thank you for again sharing your story. As we've been talking with Jeri about her journey in life and that inner turmoil that she experienced at a very young age, and though she wanted it to go away and wanted to ignore it, it wasn't until she crossed over that chasm and was able to face some of those dragons and demons, which then began the journey of some peace. Thank you for being with us this week, and I look forward to being with you next week.